everybody, welcome back to another edition, Texas fans, of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports on this terrific Friday Eve. We're right before Friday. Hope everyone is having a fantastic work week, a fantastic school week, wherever you might be. Welcome into episode 13 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, officially 9 days away from the kickoff of the Texas football season. I'm your host, yours truly, diehard Longhorn sports fan, Michael Ween, co-host of the Raw Prospect Podcast. Go check out Emmy and I's work. We're doing a ton of great stuff. Like and subscribe to our channel. Today, we have a jam-packed show. On Monday, I talked about the Texas defense and what the roster looks like, the personnel, what my expectations were for the Texas defense. Today, we will be doing much of the same, but for the offense. This offense has a ton of talent. There are also some questions that need to be answered, but the expectation is that this Texas offense will be one of the better offenses, not only in the Big 12, but in the entire country with their skill position talent and the fact that they have all 5 starters returning on their offensive line, 10 starters in total returning on this offense. The only guy that they lost, and it's a big piece, Bijan Robinson, drafted number 8 overall to the Atlanta Falcons, who I just watched tonight in the preseason. Bijan, of course, did not play, but my Steelers, shut them out. So that was also good to watch. But yeah, let's jump right into this content. I'm not going to keep you guys waiting any longer. Thank you to the 2 people I have watching right now. Drop your questions in the chat. I will go ahead and open up that chat feature so I see those questions as they come in. But I wanted to start today, and there are a lot of places we could start with this Texas offense. I wanted to start today by talking about a position room that's been one of the more competitive position battles throughout fall camp, or was one of the more competitive position battles and more interesting positions to watch throughout fall camp for a variety of reasons. One of which being the fact that Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson both left for the NFL draft. That's about 80% of this team's carries from last year. Yes, David, Roschon was a big loss as well. He wasn't a starter for this Texas team, but he could have been for about, half of the teams out there in college football at the Power 5 level. He was that good of a running back. Very productive player at the college level. I expect him to do really good things with the Bears. But you lose an elite guy like Bijan, the likes of which we might not see again for a long time at the University of Texas, although the way that Texas is recruiting at the running back position, and we're going to talk about a guy in CJ Baxter who is rated as a 5-star and is going to get a lot of playing time as a freshman this year. It's going to be hard to match the production that you had at the running back position last year. I mentioned this briefly in Monday's episode. I said, if you're expecting Bijan, Roschon level of production individually from each of these running backs that Texas has in this running back room, I would temper your expectations just a little bit. Now, that's not to say that I don't think this Texas running back room isn't talented, that I don't think this Texas running back room will be bad. I still think this will be a very productive group of running backs. Texas will still be able to run the football, primarily due to an offensive line that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. We've seen Jonathan Brooks in brief stints. A guy like CJ Baxter, the 5-star running back from the 23 recruiting class, out of Edgewater, Florida. He's a guy that had a really good fall camp, and some believe, sources within, the Texas program believe he could be the workhorse running back by the end of the season. So the reason I want to talk about the running backs is because not only does a lot of the production from that room leave and go to the NFL draft. But there are some interesting, things to talk about here. Number one, Jonathan Brooks. Let's talk about Jonathan Brooks first. The expectation is that he will start next Saturday's game. Like, he will be the starting running back for Texas, at least for the first couple of weeks, while CJ Baxter and maybe some of these other guys get their feet wet. That's the expectation from sources within the Texas football program. And basically, from what we've believed as Texas fans to be the case ever since last year ended and Bijan and Roschon declared for the draft. Jonathan Brooks, I do expect to be the starter for the first portion of the season. And the reason is because he's the most experienced guy in this room. Now, Keilan Robinson is a guy who also has some experience and will get playing time, but he's viewed, I think, more as kind of a gadget guy, more than like a workhorse running back. And he's going to be a huge contributor, as we've seen on special teams. So he's going to be doing a lot of different things, probably more capable and more versatile as a player than Jonathan Brooks. And he still will see equal, if not more, playing time because he will be playing on special teams. But Jonathan Brooks, I do think, for the first couple games of this season, will get the start at running back for Texas. And that's exciting because I think Jonathan Brooks is a really damn good football player. He's not Bijan Robinson. He might not even be Roschon Johnson. But I think he's going to have a really good season. Remember, over 2 years of spot action, because he's had to sit behind some very talented running backs so far at Texas, mainly Bijan Robinson. He's been productive. It's a small sample size, but 51 carries for 340 yards, 6 touchdowns. And if you watch the bowl game, he had a 34-yard touchdown reception in the Alamo Bowl last year against Washington. And that Washington defense was a good defense. I think, again, he's going to be first in line in a group of running backs. He's going to be the 1A per se. He's going to start games. He has the most experience. Replacing Bijan and Roschon will be a tall task, but I think behind this offensive line, the third-year product from Hallettsville, Texas, has the potential to be a very capable replacement. I really like Jonathan Brooks. I think he's good in pass protection, which I think is very valuable. A bigger body, kind of glides, has a good running style. Some people knock him for his lack of speed and explosiveness, but I think within this Texas running back room, you have different skill sets. And I think Jonathan Brooks will be that workhorse. And I expect him to have a really good season. I mean, there's no reason to believe that he cannot. And then you look at a guy like CJ Baxter, the 5-star out of Edgewater, Florida. Man, this guy is talented, and we've heard a lot of rave reviews out of fall camp. Top 25 national recruit, number 4, CJ Baxter will be wearing the number 4. I think he's going to get a lot of meaningful snaps early on. And, I said this before. If a 5-star is even, it's likely that he's leaving. And so once CJ Baxter gets his feet under him, gets his feet wet in this Texas system and gets comfortable a little bit, man, I think you're going to see by midseason, by that Oklahoma game around there, CJ Baxter could be the starting running back for the Longhorns. 5-star guy, highly recruited. We've seen Texas go into the state of Florida once again and get another borderline 5-star prospect in next year's recruiting class, and Jarrett Gibson out of IMG Academy. CJ Baxter, man, big, came into camp ready to compete. He's been signaled out a lot by Sark in his press conference as a guy that's not only is good, catching the ball in the backfield and running as a powerful, explosive runner, probably more explosive, more so, and more athletic than a guy like Jonathan Brooks. But a guy who's been signaled out by Sark for how good he is in pass protection. And that's huge. One of the easiest ways to get on the field as a freshman is to either be good on special teams or do the little things right. And the little thing as a running back that can really help this Texas team is being good in pass protection as a running back, being able to be that well-rounded player, the guy who can run, catch balls out of the backfield, and pass protect, pick up blitzes. I think CJ Baxter is going to get, if not even carries at the start of the season, he's going to get his fair share of work. And I think by the end of the year, eventually elite talent wins out at the end of the day. I still think Jonathan Brooks will play a huge role. I think you'll see Keelan Robinson in certain situations. I don't know what the future holds for a guy like Jayden Blue. Again, I said this last episode. If you don't see him on the two deep or on the depth chart as a guy who, you think will be a real contributor this year, I think he's one of those guys who could transfer early out of the program, which is fine because Texas has a deep room, but you still, it's a luxury to have a guy like Jayden Blue as kind of your fourth or your fifth running back. It's nice to have that depth. David, I'll get to your question here in a second, as we're going to talk about the quarterback here in a couple minutes. That's where we're going next. But yeah, I think you guys can see the picture and how this is going to work. Brooks, the most experienced guy, really productive when he's been on the field in short stints, really good running back, really solid football player, really high floor, probably a lower ceiling, but behind this really good, what I think is going to be a really good top 10 level nationally offensive line this year with 5 returning starters on it, Brooks will be a solid guy. It's just, when does the talent of a guy like CJ Baxter show, and how soon is it that he takes over? Again, I think we get to the months of November and December, and that's when I think a guy like CJ Baxter could end up being your workhorse if you're Texas. But yeah, the running back position is certainly a position that I'll be watching to see how things shape up early on in the season. I want to see how Sark divvies up the carries early on. I expect to see a lot of a rotation there early on before they really figure out who that workhorse guy is going to be. Because historically, in Sark's coaching career, he's had that one guy, the one bell cow that he's been able to go to in the backfield. He likes having that one guy with a bunch of depth behind him, good depth for that matter, that will get playing time, but he likes to have that one go-to guy, as we saw with Bijan. So, running backs that he's had back at Alabama, throughout his coaching career at Washington and USC, we've seen that. And so, yeah, it'll be it's one of the more interesting positions to watch, I think, next Saturday for this Texas offense. How many of the carries does Jonathan Brooks get? How much playing time does CJ Baxter see? And in what situations are they maybe using a guy like Keelan Robinson? Or are they maybe even putting Jayden Blue out there on the field just to keep his, individual morale up so he does not transfer? In a game like Rice, where Texas could end up being up by 5 or 6 touchdowns realistically next Saturday, I think you could see a guy like Jayden Blue potentially get some run at the running back spot. So maybe that will be his chance to really showcase what he can do and keep himself as a valuable contributor to this Texas team. So that's the running back position. That's really all we need to say. The name to watch, though, is obviously CJ Baxter, the highly recruited freshman. He's going to be one of those freshmen that makes an immediate impact on this team from that 2023 recruiting class, which I mentioned last episode finished as the number 3 overall rated recruiting class in the country, with guys like Arch Manning, with guys like Jonte Cook, with guys like, on the defensive side, Anthony Hill and Malik Muhammad, Colton Bassick. The list goes on and on. So that's the running back room. Let's transition to the quarterback room. And then we'll go receivers and then offensive line to wrap it all up. David asks, what concerns do you have for Quinn Ewers this year? Thank you for the question. It's a great question. It's a question that a lot of people are asking themselves, Texas fans included, are asking themselves, what concerns do you have for Quinn? Well, first, let's address the fact that he's had a great offseason. All the sources seem to be unanimous in the fact that Quinn has been more dedicated this offseason. He's cut his weight by 20 or 25 pounds. He's in better shape. He's been more dedicated in his study of the playbook. He's really digged in as becoming a more vocal leader on this team. And everything that he's done in fall camp has throughout the spring and in fall camp has solidified himself as this team's number one, this team's quarterback, the leader on this team. Like, this is Quinn's team. And the one thing that I've been saying over and over on this podcast and elsewhere throughout our channel when we've talked about this Texas team going into 2023, Texas will go as far as Quinn takes them. Like, a lot of this season, we can talk about the defense, which I think will be a good defense. We can talk about, how good these Texas receivers are. We can talk about how talented of a running back room they have. We can talk about how good of an offensive line we think they have. All the talent on this Texas team, we can talk about it all day. But if the Quinn Ewers from last year shows up, then I don't think much of that is going to matter, because at the end of the day, this team needs all Big 12 type season from Quinn Ewers. If they can get that, well, then we're talking about the possibilities that and the benefits that this Texas football program could reap from that. First of all, it's likely that Quinn, if he has that type of season, would go first round of the NFL draft just due to his arm talent and his talent as a football player. He's a guy who was one of the highest rated quarterbacks coming out of high school ever, within the recruiting industry. And we saw flashes last year. It just wasn't consistent enough. And number two, if Quinn plays it at all Big 12 level, Texas should win the Big 12 because they're by far the most talented roster, top to bottom, and they have the depth this year. We'll talk more about that on Monday's episode as we address our official prediction for the Texas team, game by game on the schedule, whether or not we think I'm going to, pick them to win the Big 12, and then how far I think they can go in terms of, their ceiling, what is their floor, and what is the realistic expectation. If Quinn plays at that all Big 12 level, the ceiling for this Texas team is unlimited. I really think he's going to have a really good season. We need to see him around that 160 plus a passer efficiency rating that is, a lot of the elite quarterbacks in college at least have, that's like the baseline for a very good quarterback in college football. Last year, it was not pretty. Finished with a 132 passer efficiency rating. There was a lot of inconsistency when it came to, game to game, his accuracy throwing the football down the field. Accuracy throwing the football down the field. His connection and the chemistry and the timing with these Texas receivers at times was off. And the one good thing I think that Texas fans can pull from last year was that despite all his inconsistencies with accuracy and footwork within the pocket, he only ended up throwing, I think it was 5 or 6 interceptions last year, which is, he took relatively good care of the football. And so I think in terms of my biggest concerns for this year with Quinn Ewers, he has immense potential. He's just got to be more consistent on a game-to-game basis with his footwork and his accuracy. Mainly throwing the football at the intermediate to deep levels of the football field. I think that the more talent that Texas has in this receiver room, that's obviously going to help him because he won't have to solely rely on mainly Xavier Worthy kind of being a receiver that he's not really meant to be like he did last year. Texas had to largely rely on Xavier Worthy last year, a Xavier Worthy that was hindered by, a broken hand for half the season and wasn't really the Xavier Worthy that we saw from his freshman year. Texas had to rely on him to be that sort of everything, do-it-all type of receiver, the guy who could stretch the field, as a deep threat and do everything else that Xavier Worthy does, getting open in the short to intermediate game and making plays with the football once he gets it in his hands. Truly an elite talent. They kind of had to rely on him to do some things that he's good enough to do, but wasn't really his strong suit. And now that they have, they go into the transfer portal, they get A.D. Mitchell from Georgia. They bring back Isaiah Neyor healthy. They get Jonte Cook. They still have Jordan Whittington. Now that they have that receiving corps healthy and it's more talented than last year, that's going to help Quinn. But every game, snap to snap, half to half, he's got to be more consistent with his footwork within the pocket. I'd like to actually see him use his legs a little more since he's cut about, 15, 20, 25 pounds. I'd like to see him run a little bit more. I think he gets knocked a little bit, from a national perception perspective for his lack of sort of high-end athleticism. But I still think he's a really good athlete. Maybe not the best athlete we've ever seen at the quarterback position. He's probably not the first or second best athlete in the Texas quarterback room alone. But I think when we saw him run last year, it was highly effective. I like to see him use his legs a little more when things break down in the pocket. But the biggest two, consistency on a game-to-game basis, and then setting his feet and being more accurate with the football downfield. Those are my concerns. If he can do those things on a more consistent basis and he can elevate himself close or near the levels that we saw him play, in that Alabama first quarter, the OU game, and a couple other moments, the bowl game, a couple other moments throughout last season, we see that version of Quinn Ewers, this Texas team. They're going to win the Big 12, and they're going to be in the conversation for the college football playoff. Because if you have a guy like Quinn Ewers who can finally find that consistency with all the talent that he is around him and how much more talented this Texas roster is than much of the rest of the Big 12, I mean, the sky's the limit, man. So to answer your question, I hope that answered your question. Consistency on a game-to-game, half-to-half basis. I think that will improve. The biggest thing, though, is setting your feet in the pocket. He had a tendency to throw off his back foot last year, relied on his arm talent a little too much at times, and being more accurate with the football at the intermediate to deep levels of the football field. I think this Texas receiving room will help him. I think the offensive line will help him as it'll be improved from last year. But it's all up to him to do it consistently on a game-to-game basis. I expect him to have a really good season, though. I think Quinn's going to have a really good year. Just how good can it be? the best thing that can happen to this Texas football program is Quinn has that all Big 12 type season. He has a borderline All-American type season. As David mentions in the chat, maybe he even has that Heisman Trophy campaign worthy season. Like, he's up there with the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, the Michael Penix Jr.'s, Bo Nix. I mean, all the really good quarterbacks for next year's draft class. He's up there and he goes first round of the draft next year. Like, that's the best case scenario, best thing that can happen to this Texas football program. Because if he does that, it's likely he's going to be drafted in the top half of the first round, and it's likely means that Texas had a really successful season in their last year of the Big 12. And, it'll help recruiting. It'll help a bunch of different things. It'll help continue the momentum for Sark, raise the expectations going into the SEC. I mean, there are so many benefits that Texas will reap from Quinn Ewers having the type of season that we think he can have. And that's all Big 12 caliber season. Maybe, an All-American caliber season. We'll see. Now, it is hard to make the leap from just an quarterback to All-American quarterback. But with the work that he's put in this offseason, to his body, to his mechanics, to working with these Texas receivers, to becoming that leader, to studying the playbook, to working with his trainer, I think all of that you're going to see pay off very, very soon. Now, I want to see what it looks like early on, because the reports out of fall camp were that the Texas defense largely, for the most part, got the better of this Texas offense in both scrimmages. So this Texas offense, you might see a little rust early on, but at the end of the day, I hate to put too much pressure on him, but a lot of this falls on Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian. Like, that's just what it comes down to at the end of the day. So that's the running back. Those are the quarterbacks. Let's talk about receivers now, because we're about 30 minutes in. We're going to go about an hour tonight. I had planned to talk some recruiting. Hopefully we're going to do that soon, maybe even this weekend. Keep an eye out for another episode. As I want to get into this top 10 Texas football player conversation that a lot of Texas football fans and a lot of Texas beat reporters are debating on social media right now. Emmy's in the chat. Welcome. Big 12 championship or bust. Thank you for tuning in, by the way. Go check out all the great content that we're putting out there. And yes, I do agree with you. I mean, Big 12 championship or bust. We will be talking more about overall expectations for this team and my game-by-game prediction for this upcoming season on Monday as we officially head into the first game week of the season. And Emmy himself will be joining me 1 week from tonight on next Thursday's episode. That's the plan right now, at least. Things could change. So get ready for that, as I'll have guests. If you're knowledgeable about Texas football, or you have opinions and you want to come on and just talk college football, let me know and I will have you on the show. I welcome guests, and Emmy will be the first next Thursday. Big 12 championship or bust, I agree. But a lot of that falls on the shoulders of Quinn Ewers, and that's that. Let's talk about receivers. This Texas receiver room is one of the more talented receiving rooms in the country, period. Where you rank them is up to you, but they're top 5. It's a deep receiving room. They're going to have freshmen that I think see the field early, particularly the 5-star freshman from DeSoto High School, a top 3 to 5 high school football program in the state of Texas. Jonte Cook, who has looked unbelievable, maybe even better than a 5-star. Some sources have said in fall camp. He's going to work his way onto the field, much like CJ Baxter early. Like those two freshmen are going to make immediate impacts. And that's great to see from a recruiting class that there are high expectations for. It's great to see that some of these freshmen are already going to make impacts on this Texas football team so early on. Awesome to see. I think Jonte Cook, he's one of the main players I'm watching next weekend when they play Rice. Going to be watching a lot of individuals. We'll preview the game next Saturday. Players that we're watching, players that we want to see, in a game that Texas likely as a team should win fairly easily. All due respect to Rice as a football program. But Texas should end up winning that game by a decent margin, to say the least. It's going to be more about who looks good, who can we put on the field that next weekend in Tuscaloosa against Bama. Which of these freshmen are ready for that? And I think Jonte Cook is one of those guys. Really smooth route runner, really hard worker. Watch out for Jonte Cook. He's a guy that by the end of the season could be getting consistent starting reps at the receiver position. But this all starts with Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy, period. David says, I'll join, but I'll just rattle off the most amount of hot takes you've ever heard. Awesome. We would love that. I'd love to hear all of your hot takes, what those are. I'm curious what goes on in your head at times, David, but we'd love to have you on. I think that'd be really entertaining. I think the people of the Raw Prospect podcast would love that if you came on. You're welcome to join me anytime. Just let me know when you're free. You can come on. I'll send you a link. You can join this podcast, and we'll have a discussion about not anything. It's got to be college football related, as I'm keeping this primarily a college sports show and mostly Texas focused. But all the hot takes that you want, bring them on. I'd love that. Love to have you on soon. This all starts with Xavier Worthy, the true junior receiver who, as I mentioned, had a really good freshman season. I think he broke Texas records for, receiving yards and touchdowns as a freshman. He returns for his junior year. Again, led the Longhorns in receiving each of his first 2 years on the 40 acres. And last year, one of the biggest questions at the start of the offseason was Xavier Worthy's struggles at the end of last year. The drop passes were a concern. Yeah, I'm a pretty funny guy, ain't I? Sometimes. The drop passes at the end of last year, the body language wasn't great from Xavier Worthy, as I mentioned early on in this episode. Him and Quinn Ewers just weren't able to connect on a lot of those deep passes. David said he also wonders what happens up in my mind. Well, yeah, I think we all do at times. I wonder what goes on in my head sometimes. We all have those moments, but I certainly, with living with you for a semester, that'll be a fun episode when you come on for sure. Xavier Worthy, though, a lot of Texas fans shit talking him at the end of last year, and rightfully so. I mean, a lot of those balls that he dropped, he should have caught, and he would tell you so. But we have to understand the situation. Broken hand for half the year. He played through it. Still produced at, still was the leading receiver on this team. And I think the expectation is this year that it's getting spicy. LMAO. Yes, it is, Emmy. I think the expectation is that Xavier Worthy will have an All-American type season. He's healthy again. He does the hardest thing easy. He makes the hardest thing as a receiver look easy, and that's getting open. He's open all the damn time. Quinn Ewers just has to get him the football. I think he'll catch it this year. I think he's due for a 1,000+ yard season. He was, I believe, voted Forster's second team All-American by the AP just a couple of days ago. There are high expectations for Xavier Worthy despite sort of the down year that he had last year, but it was still a really damn good season for Xavier Worthy last year. It all starts with Xavier Worthy, though. He's still the number one guy in this Texas receiving room. But the big story is they bring in A.D. Mitchell, the highly productive receiver from Georgia, the prize junior transfer, one of the better transfers in the transfer portal from this past offseason. They bring him in to be that number 2, 6'4", Texas-born playmaker down the field, big body, contested catches, can use him in the red zone. Really impressive throughout the spring game or spring ball and fall camp. Was Texas's most productive receiver in the 2 scrimmages that they had, according to the reports. He's going to help this Texas receiving room tremendously. Because if you remember at times last year, and Casey Kane is a really good football player. Like, he would start for a lot of the other teams in the Big 12. But times last year, Texas was relying upon Jatavion Sanders, the tight end, and Casey Kane to be, their number 2, number 3 weapons at times last year. And of course, Jordan Whittington is very solid. But now that you have A.D. Mitchell, I mean, you have a guy who at the end of the season could end up having, an all Big 12 type of year. All Big 12 first team. Like, he's that good. Played in 4 college football playoff games at Georgia and caught a touchdown in all 4 of them. Like, that's not easy to do. Really productive at Georgia. We all know how talented that team in Athens is, how much talent they have, how well they do in recruiting. Georgia fans themselves, people within the Georgia program, the coaches have said A.D. Mitchell would have been our bona fide number 1 guy had he come back to Georgia for this season. Like, he was going to be our guy. I mean, we know they have Brock Bowers, and that's a different story, but A.D. Mitchell was going to be their number 1, bona fide number 1 receiver. And that tells you really everything you need to know about A.D. Mitchell. He's just struggled to stay on the field. Hopefully he stays healthy, knock on wood. And again, that's been one of the better things about Texas this offseason is they've stayed healthy. They've made it through the bulk of fall camp, and we're almost to game week, and there are no major injuries to speak of. That's fantastic. A.D. Mitchell absolutely could end up all Big 12, and a guy that, if he plays at the level I think he can, could be like maybe sneak into the first round. I mean, he's got to really have a big season to do that, but definitely get drafted early on day 2. Like, he could be that type of receiver for the Longhorns. And he's a reason that people are really excited about this team because they were missing really that number 2 threat from the receiver position last year. And not only is he a great number 2 and could be a number 1 on most other teams in college football, but it means that, Jordan Whittington is now your number 3. Fifth-year senior and former Rivals top 35 national recruit. Really good player. Things that excite Texas fans the most about Jordan Whittington were his first couple years on campus really struggled to stay healthy. Had a lot of injuries, had to go through a lot. Last year, injury-free season, really productive. It's all systems go for Jordan Whittington as their number 3 option, maybe even your number 4 option when you take into consideration the talents of one JT Sanders at the tight end spot. I mean, the amount of weapons, and we already talked about Jonte Cook. We could see guys like DeAndre Moore and even a speedster like Ryan Niblett get on the field as well. in some of these games. I mean, this Texas receiver room, along with Casey Kane, goes at least 5 or 6 deep. And they're all really, really good NFL caliber type players. They could all achieve that. I think JT Sanders is a guy who's going to be drafted next year. Will be like a top 2-3 tight end in college football, right behind Brock Bowers at Georgia. I've said that multiple times this offseason, and I truly believe that. I think he's ready to have a really big season. Had a record-setting year last year, one of the best years a Texas tight end has ever had. And I think he's only going to, get better and get more looks this year within this Texas offense. The amount of weapons that Texas has at their disposal with Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Jonte Cook, J.T. Sanders, those being the main guys. And then you have your Casey Canes, your DeAndre Moores, your Ryan Niblets of the world who can make an impact here and there. It's really exciting room. Like they are, in my opinion, the top 3 room in the country. When you take into consideration all the receiving talent that they have, plus the tight end, it's bona fide top 3, top 5 in the country. There are high expectations for this Texas receiver room, and it's very exciting. I mean, the receiver room last year pales in comparison to what Texas has this year. And oh my God, I forgot to mention Isaiah Neyor. How could I do that? Man, I apologize to Isaiah Neyor. I didn't even mention Isaiah Neyor. That's how crazy this Texas receiving core is. He's coming back off an ACL injury, but he was a highly productive player at Wyoming his first couple seasons. Transfers to Texas last year. Unfortunately, went down in one of last year's fall scrimmages with that knee injury. We'll see how healthy he is, but reports out of fall camp were that he looks fully healthy. Maybe the most athletic guy in this Texas receiving room, and he'll be that deep threat. Oh boy, he's going to be a difference maker if he's healthy. I mean, that's holy cow. That's Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Isaiah Neyor, all 3 NFL caliber guys, plus Jordan Whittington, plus J.T. Sanders, plus Jonte Cook, plus Ryan Niblett, plus DeAndre Moore, plus Casey King. Holy cow. Just think about that for a minute. So that's the Texas receiver room. Top 5 room in the country. Maybe top 3. I mean, they're right up there, in my opinion, with Ohio State. I think it's that good. And I think, here's my bold prediction. I think by the end of the season, Xavier Worthy will be an All-American. And Jonte Cook will be in the starting rotation. I'll put it that way. Okay. The last group we have to talk about today is the offensive line. Talked about everyone but the offensive line so far. Now we got to talk about this offensive line because it is really exciting what Texas is bringing back along the offensive line. You start with Kelvin Banks. And I got to mention Kyle Flood as one of the best coaches on the staff. He's recruited a lot of these guys. He's really flipped the script in terms of the bodies and the athletes that Texas has been recruiting on the offensive line. That all started with that 2022 recruiting class. And we've already seen huge impacts from that class where they get 2 5-stars, bring in, I think it was 6 or 7 offensive linemen in that class, all, 4 and 5 stars. That was the offensive line class, and they really flipped the script as to how they're recruiting on the offensive line. And the depth that they have on this offensive line is impressive. Reports out of fall camp are that Texas has, they believe, 8 or 9 guys they are comfortable playing in a game right now. They have their 5 starters and then 3 or 4 guys behind them that they feel comfortable playing in game right now. And that's huge. Depth is humongous on the offensive line. So that's exciting. And it all stems back to that 2022 recruiting class. The way that Kyle Flood, who came over from Alabama um, with Sarkisian, when Sarkisian was hired a couple of years ago, the way he's recruited, the way he's developed these guys, and the way that this Texas offensive line has improved, all that credit must go to Kyle Flood. This all starts with him. But we start with Kelvin Banks. Like, I don't think people truly understand how good Kelvin Banks was last year. Started all 13 games as a true freshman, the 5-star recruit, earned second team All Big 12, should have been first team All Big 12 in my opinion, but earned second team All Big 12, 6'4", 325 pounds, good feet, really good in pass protection, a mauler in the run game, the number one overall recruit in Texas. I think he's on his way to first team All American status. He's that good. Only gave up, I think it was one quarterback hit or one sack last year in a bunch of snaps. He is All American good. And it's at a very, premium position, the left tackle position. Kelvin Banks, one of the better left tackles in college football. I think he's on his way to having an All-American type season. All starts with him and then Christian Jones on the other side at right tackle. Christian Jones is one of the more interesting case studies of a Texas football player that you can find on this roster. He's a 6-year senior. He's got a ton of experience. Huge. When you look at pictures of Christian Jones from fall camp, he's absolutely one of the more humongous human beings that I've ever seen on a Texas football offensive line, if not the biggest. 6'6", 330 pounds, 35 starts. He started at left tackle early on in his career and has since transitioned to right tackle. Not a 6-year senior, a 5th-year senior. All Big 12 honorable mention last year, had his best season as a Longhorn. And I think he's another guy that could have an all Big 12 caliber type of season. Really good at the right tackle position. I think Texas is set at the tackle positions. I think they have one of the better tackle duos in the country. And that's what's really exciting about this offensive line is, last year they were tested. Both tackles were tested. They had to go up against, 3 to 4 defensive linemen in the Big 12 that ended up being first-round picks in last year's draft. Kelvin Banks was tested, and so was Christian Jones, the guy from K-State, the guy from Texas Tech. There were guys in the Big 12 last year that could get after the passer, and they did a very good job last year. It was spearheaded by the production that those tackles gave them. I think we're looking at all Big 12 type season from Christian Jones and all American type stuff and top 5 overall pick in a couple years type of player that Kelvin Banks is. He's that good. And I'm gonna give you my top 10 Texas football players on this roster at some point, maybe even this weekend, because it's a hot topic right now in the land of Longhorn football. Where does Quinn Ewers eventually slot into that now that fall camp has passed and we've heard new reports about some of these players? Where does it stand going into the season? I'll get into that maybe on my next episode. But Kelvin Banks is certainly up there when we talk about the best players on this team, maybe even the best player, just to give you a sneak peek into what that looks like. They returned Jake Majors at center. Really good player, experience, 27 starts at the center position going back to his freshman year. He's a true junior, made Big 12 honorable mention last year. Really smart guy. The weakness of this Texas offensive line last year was the interior and their ability to run in between the tackles at times. We saw, at points in times they struggled to get it going on the ground, especially in that TCU game at home last year where TCU really controlled the line of scrimmage on the interior. And, we're looking for major improvement from a guy like Jake Majors, who's been solid so far in his Texas career and is a really good player. He actually has a Lamborghini NIL deal. How cool is that? That, there aren't too many other programs, if any, around the country that can say, oh, well, our center he drives a Lamborghini. He has a Lamborghini NIL deal. And I think NIL is one of the reasons that Texas is kicking ass right now in recruiting. I mean, we're just being naive if you don't think that NIL isn't helping programs like Georgia and A&M and Texas recruit at the levels that they are. You're just naive if you don't think that at this point, if you don't think NIL is a very major factor in, where kids are deciding to play these days. That's a totally different conversation for another day. But I mean, Texas's center drives a Lamborghini. Just say that. And I think that's helped in, the things that Texas is able to do, recruiting on the offensive line. Hayden Conner returns at left guard, started all 13 games last year as a sophomore. I expect a jump from him in year 2. I think he's a really good player. The biggest question, though, coming into fall camp was who's going to start at right guard. As Junior Angilau, of course, left. He's now playing at Oregon after his injury last year. And there was a question at who would step up to replace Cole Hudson, who has been injured here at the start of the season with that shoulder injury or whatever he's been dealing with. Who's going to step up? And it's going to be DJ Campbell at that right guard spot, which I am super excited about. He's high up on my list in terms of players that I'm watching early on in the season, especially in that Rice game. Like, is he a guy that's ready to go up against Bama in Tuscaloosa? I think he is. Super talented. Number 2 overall recruit in Texas in 2022. 6'3", 350 pounds, good frame. Heard really good things out of fall camp. I think it's an upgrade and a higher upside move by Texas to put him at left guard. So you go left to right. Kelvin Banks, who I think could be an All-American. Hayden Conner, really good player. Jake Majors, really good player. High floor type players. DJ Campbell potentially could be this year's Kelvin Banks, just at the left guard spot. And then Christian Jones, all Big 12 caliber type of player. And then you have depth behind them. Some of the guys that Texas feels comfortable playing, Cam Williams, former Texas top 100 recruit, can play a lot of different positions. You can put him at guard. You can put him at right tackle. He'll be the first guy, I think, to come, I guess, off the bench per se from this Texas offensive line group. And then you have a couple other guys in there. The depths of this we can get into another time. But Malik Agbo, Neto Umeozulu, Trevor Gooseby, who's a true freshman, a Rivals top 25 type of player, 4-star recruit in this past year's recruiting class. This offensive line group, it's deep, it's talented. I expect the Texas offensive line to be a top 15, top 20 caliber group in college football, barring health. They're going to, if they stay healthy, as long as they have those tackles in place, I think DJ Campbell is a high upside upgrade at the right guard spot. I think Jake Majors, with another year of maturation and getting stronger in the weight room, will have a really good year at center. And then Hayden Conner is a really solid player and was last year. I think he could be a sleeper, all Big 12 type candidate. And so could DJ Campbell. We haven't seen this much depth, this much talent on the Texas offensive line, this much continuity on the Texas offensive line in a long time. And that's what's exciting. It's a veteran offensive line. It's a skill position bouquet. I mean, they have skilled position guys galore. But then again, it all comes down to Quinn Ewers. How far this Texas offense goes, how good it is, how good this Texas football team is in 2023 comes down to Sark and Quinn Ewers for the most part. And again, as I said, I think Quinn Ewers, with everything that he's done this offseason, is on his way to having an all Big 12 caliber season. But all of my predictions will come on Monday. Thank you to everyone who's asked questions in the chat tonight. David, Emmy, for your comments and your questions. I'll open it up here, the last couple minutes of the show. If you have any last minute questions, put those in the chat as it pertains to the Texas offense. Put those in the chat. I will answer them before we get out of here for tonight. Again, I plan to talk some recruiting, but I'm going to save that for another time. We can give it the proper time that is needed, I think, to talk about it. As I wanted to really get a full breakdown and a deep dive into this Texas offense, an offense that has high expectations with 10 returning starters this year. But then again, all falls on the shoulders of Quinn Ewers and the consistency on a game-to-game basis, his accuracy throwing the ball down the football field, and his mechanics. And Emmy said this on one of the podcasts that he's come on. We'd like to see him use his legs a little more. Underrated as an athlete. He's not Malik Murphy as an athlete. I don't think he's, he might not even be Arch Manning, what Arch Manning is as an athlete, but he's certainly capable of using his legs and being effective as a runner. And I think now that he's dropped 15, 20 pounds, I think you're going to see a lot more of that, which I'll certainly be looking for early on this year. I think last year there was a little bit of a hesitation for Quinn after the injury occurred to run and risk getting hurt again last year. But I think this year, with his confidence level, which is at an all-time high right now, you're going to see that be a bigger part and more prominent part of his game. So we'll talk more about the offense as time goes on. If there are no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you know people that like college football or just, love Texas in general and want more insight on, this Texas football team going into 2023 and throughout the season, please tell them about this. I would highly appreciate that. And I will see you maybe this weekend, but definitely on Monday night for our Texas football 2023 prediction show, along with some other things, other topics that I'd like to get into. And go check out everything that Amy and I are doing on the main feed. We've got our NFL preview series going on. We've got a bunch of college football stuff on a national, from a national standpoint that you should go check out, among other things. Go check it all out. We greatly appreciate it. Like and subscribe and recommend this to any of your friends. I will see you guys on Monday. With all that being said, have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Hook 'em horns. We're only 9 days away. Super excited for college football and enjoy week 0 of the college football season. That's right. We have real football to talk about this weekend as Notre Dame takes on Navy at 1:30, nationally televised game on NBC. So excited for football. We're mere 9 days away from the Longhorns taking the field at DKR. Hook 'em horns. Let's have a great weekend. And before you know it, on Monday, we'll see you for game week. It's game week of Texas football. Get ready for it. Peace out. Hook 'em horns, and see you soon.